Hello and welcome to Network. I'm Lebogang Sejake in for Siphumelele Zondi. Today we have information on an internet connectivity report that ranks South Africa 31 out of 50 countries. We tell you about a startups competition that is looking for female honor voters. Our studio guest is Wellington Khadu from Media Monitoring Africa. He will discuss countries that block the internet in times of protests or elections. Find us on SABC Network on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. It's newsnetwork@sabc.co.za on email. Let's start with your technology and social media news. Can you tell? South Africa has ranked 31 out of 50 countries in the Huawei Global Connectivity Index. It's the best performing country in Africa. The report checks how countries around the world are doing in terms of internet connectivity. Siphumelele Zondi was in China for the release of the report.
The Internet of Things affects the future of our cities as we want smart cities with cashless public transport systems, cars that drive themselves and healthcare systems that use technology to make citizens' lives easier. This was one of the topics at the Huawei Global Analyst Summit in Shenzhen, China, where the Global Connectivity Index was also released.
We assessed 4 different aspects of the ICT industry. For example, like broadband penetration, data center usage, mobile phone penetration, etc. So many different criteria. Based on these criteria, we established a ranking from 1 to 50, and South Africa was ranked 31 in these 50 rankings.
There are 3 big categories: the starters, the adopters, and front runners. Starters are countries that are now installing technology infrastructure. Adopters are countries that already have the infrastructure, and they include South Africa and China. South Africa is the only African country in the adopters category. The report says the country needs to figure out ways of merging the digital economy with the real economy.
For us as governments, what is good is that they are not sanctioned by us. So they are independent and objective. It's almost a realistic reflection of where they think you are. And of course, in terms of the discussion and analysis, it gives you more insights as to where you should strengthen your efforts.
Despite this, the Global Connectivity Index ranks South Africa number 1 in Africa, ahead of Kenya, Morocco and Algeria.
Basically, most of the African nations, actually all of them except South Africa, are part of the starters category, so the first of the 3, which basically signifies they need to, they're on a good way. I mean, they're starting, but they need to invest more into broadband penetration, for example, fiber optics, etc. The mid section where South Africa is in, the adopters section, means there was already investment done, but it needs to be done more to become a developed nation in terms of ICT infrastructure.
The government says such reports are important and make them realize that they have to work harder to use technology to improve the lives of citizens.
What government then has done to follow very closely to those research outcomes by saying roll out broadband to the most remote rural areas, so as to make sure that by 2020 the whole country is connected.
Some of the countries that rank above South Africa in the Global Connectivity Index are in the front runners category, and they include Australia, America and Netherlands.
Early morning camping and long queues will cease to exist in Gauteng schools. The department has decided to digitize the application process. From 2017, no walk-ins will be allowed in Gauteng schools.
Gauteng MEC for Education Panyasari Sufi has apologized to frustrated parents and guardians. This after the application portal failed to withstand the volume of applications and crashed. The department has then decided to stress test the system before relaunching it next week, Tuesday.
We received almost 600 hits per second, and that made it practically impossible for us to cope with the system. We immediately shut down the system for 48 hours so that we can request additional support from other government departments and other agencies that are working with this particular matter.
The Education Department says the massive numbers were brought on by parents from other provinces. However, they are confident that the system will be ready next week, irrespective of number of hits they get per second. Despite this assurance, some parents are not convinced and they would rather do physical applications.
But I think it's not convenient for any people, or to any mother or father to go and apply for the children online. They must go and do it by the school, not online.
I feel the system is failing us in a sense that I don't feel it's convenient. Like as before, I could be able to apply any school that I wanted.
It's better if we keep it manual.
It's probably going to take time before people can fully trust technology for such applications, especially if it fails to function fully for the first time around.
The Israeli embassy in South Africa is currently running an innovation competition and they urge women to enter. Producer Boitumelo Gasa spoke to the ambassador of Israel to South Africa, Arthur Lenk, to find out more about this competition.
Israel's Tel Aviv is inspiring to become the next Silicon Valley. They are doing this by inviting women-owned tech startups to participate in an international innovation competition.
We're looking for somebody who's already a leader within a startup, has an innovative idea in a company, and is on her way. So if you think you've got the next Waze or Facebook or Google, then come to us, find us on Twitter at Start Tel Aviv SA, or to the website of startuptelavivsouthafrica.com.
The Startup Tel Aviv South Africa competition is in its 4th year running. Only this time they are doing things differently. To increase the number of women in tech industry, the Israeli government is strictly allowing women participants.
That lady who's sitting in her house and says, I've got the solution for drought in South Africa, that I know how to create jobs in South Africa, or how to make the hospitals work better, or how to build more roads, or how to do anything. And she's sitting wherever she's sitting and said, I have this idea.
Some people felt that initiatives such as these are important for women empowerment.
In my opinion, I honestly do think that women are capable in coming up with ideas better than men, if I could put it in those contexts, because they give birth to children. If you can give birth to a child, you can do and come up with so many ideas, but women are not being recognized because they are women.
On the contrary, it seems that information about competitions such as Startup Tel Aviv South Africa might not be widely spread.
I'm not currently aware of any companies that are willing to fund small businesses, entrepreneurships at this point.
We don't get to see these platforms. I mean, where do you find them? Where are they making themselves known?
Entries are still open and the winners will get to attend the DLD Tech Festival in Tel Aviv in September.
A 10-year-old developer from Malawi meets Facebook's Mark Zuckerberg and the Uber saga continues. These are some of the stories that made tech headlines earlier this week. Malawi's M-Hub mobile application competition winner Panashe Jere got to meet Facebook's Mark Zuckerberg. The 10-year-old from Area 49 in Lilongwe, Malawi, developed a mobile application called Talk to Me that allows children to input text and then converts it to voice so children always have someone to talk to. This gave him the golden ticket to California's Silicon Valley, where he rubbed shoulders with some of the world's top developers. Uber, Uber, Uber. Will it ever end? Now we head to Brazil. Drivers of Buenos Aires black and yellow cabs blocked 25 key intersections around the city on Friday to protest against Uber's launch in the city earlier this week.
We all know the needs that people have. Little by little, we will be incorporating technology. Slowly, we will be adapting to everything. We pay all our taxes. We do everything the city of Buenos Aires and traffic laws ask from us. We want to fight for equal terms. This is a totally unequal fight.
Cab drivers and city officials accuse Uber of violating local regulations and risking passengers' safety by offering rides with drivers who lack a taxi license. Uber said it was permitted under Argentine law. Now heading over to the US of A. Microsoft Corp sued the US government for the right to tell its customers when a federal agency is looking at their emails, the latest in a series of clashes over privacy between the technology industry and Washington. The lawsuit filed on Thursday in federal court argues that the government is violating the US Constitution by preventing Microsoft from notifying thousands of customers about government requests for their emails and other documents. The US Department of Justice did not immediately respond to a request to comment. The government's actions contravene the USA's Fourth Amendment, which establishes the right for people and businesses to know if the government searches or seizes their property. The suit argues and the First Amendment right to free speech. After the break, we talk about social media shutdowns that take place in Africa with Wellington Khadu from Media Monitoring Africa. You can join the conversation on @SABC Network on Twitter or Facebook.
Ahika Mano produces abstract and symbolic works of art. He called his latest collection Vote with Ink, Not Blood.
Praying for peace, literally, in my own way.
The South African film titled Luister or Listen in Afrikaans tackles issues of race in the country.
I think that the end goal is the reformation of institutional culture, but how we get there is in fact through changing the language policy so that no student is forced to learn in Afrikaans.
It's fashion designers like Julia Mpoko who are starting to pay more attention to menswear and hope to make a mark in the fashion industry.
So regardless of whether you're African, European, there's certain styles that you like. So if an African man enjoys wearing simple, well-tailored pants, then yes, I guess.
Join Refulo Mula for that 1-hour weekly dose of arts and entertainment news every Friday at 9 p.m. on Trends.
Ugandan courts have decided that the challenge for elections over there cannot go to court. There was a group challenging election results. Social media was also blocked during the vote in the East African countries. It's becoming increasingly common that African governments block the internet or social media during protests or elections. Uganda was one case. In the last few days, Ethiopia's government was also accused of blocking the internet during protests in Oromo. This has happened in Burundi too. Last year, the Democratic Republic of Congo ordered network providers, including South Africa's Vodacom, to block the internet. They did as the government ordered. To discuss this further, we have Wellington Khadu from Media Monitoring Africa. Hello and welcome to Network.
Good evening and thank you for having me.
So Wellington, besides these countries that we mentioned earlier, which other countries have done this before?
Look, I mean, I think you have articulated and outlined most of them, but Congo-Brazzaville is one of them. And we know Zimbabwe in the last few weeks also talked about regulating social media. Previously, I think it happened in Mozambique when there were food riots. It also happened in Angola, I think, at some point.
So do these countries honestly see social media as a real threat?
Look, I think we need to, when we talk about these things, we need to try and look back and see their logic. So often what they're saying is that the advent of the internet brought with it challenges. And those challenges include issues around trolling, issues around people lying about other people, particularly people who have influence or some form of power. And then the most interesting one is the issue around security, that because the internet is open and everyone can access it anywhere and everywhere, there is a threat to security. But the problem is this: the way security is defined, it's loosely packaged in a way that it's open to anything and everything. And what then happens is that these governments then collude with internet service providers and then write to them and tell them to shut off internet access. Now, the problem with those things is that, look, if it's about security and privacy, governments often elevate security over privacy, which is problematic because these two are not mutually exclusive. Essentially, you need security to retain your privacy. You also need privacy to be secure. So it's about balancing these two things. It's not about elevating one over the other.
Okay, so would you say blocking the internet sort of creates more harm than it does good for these governments?
Certainly, I would think so. Of course, the internet brought with it challenges. I mean, we can't deny that. That's a fact. But the issue is it also brought up opportunities. So think about it. Imagine in a scenario where they do a blanket blockage of everything. What happens to emergencies? What happens to people who need help at a particular point in time? All of that is overlooked at the expense of a few political people with power. That doesn't make sense.
Okay, you know, Wellington, you mentioned network providers. What role do they play in these shutdowns, and can they say no to these governments? Or
they really play a big role. Their role essentially, because they provide you with access to the internet, they can essentially shut it down anytime, right? So governments does not necessarily have the power to shut it down. So they write to these internet service providers because they threaten them. If you don't shut it off, then obviously you might lose your license, for instance. And then what happens is that because internet service providers are in there to make money and to essentially make more profit, it's in their best interest not to lose a license. So they would rather sacrifice 2 days of shutting down a particular service to people and retain a license.
Okay, so you just said 2 days. That's a point I wanted to say earlier. I've noticed it's always been 2 days or a week at most. Has there been a country that has succeeded in blocking social media for months or a year?
That's a very good question. I mean, can you shut down the internet? You can, but people always find ways. I mean, the beauty about the internet is that it's built, the infrastructure itself is built in such a way that you can bypass certain things and you can always access the internet. If you shut down a particular server, there are always servers that come up anywhere and everywhere. I mean, you remember what happened during the Arab Spring when the internet was shut down. I mean, within a matter of minutes, if not hours, people could access the internet in various ways. So it's very, very difficult. And the challenge, I think, for governments really is to regulate the internet. How do you regulate it in a space where anyone and everyone has access to it? So for me, it's about saying, how can we create platforms and infrastructure that allow us as societies, as countries, not just people in government, but essentially everyone involved, saying, look, how do we manage to regulate this thing? Because we need to strike a balance. We need to find a middle ground.
You said the Arab Spring. What I wanted to know is most of these countries find other ways of bringing out information. What are some of these platforms that they use when social media or the internet is blocked?
Look, there are different ways of accessing the internet in an event like that, and there are certain groups that are essentially there to watch what's happening. If anything is blocked, they essentially bring it up. So if you remember a while back, there was this whole discussion around the right to be forgotten, where essentially what was happening there was that if you feel that there is certain information on the internet that you don't want to be there, then you have to apply to Google, and Google can take it off. And as soon as that happened, there were people who put it back up on the internet. So the question is, does the internet really forget? Not necessarily, because what happens is that people will always find ways of getting the information back to it.
But then what does this do to freedom of speech in some of these democratic countries?
Look, this is a big problem. That when you have a situation where countries essentially put a blanket blockage, what it does is that it trumps everything that we know about freedom of expression and freedom of speech. Because essentially what you're saying is, if you're doing something wrong, you have the right to shut up. Don't say anything. I mean, that doesn't happen in the offline world. In the offline world, if you don't agree with someone, obviously you can talk about it, but it really, I mean, there's scenarios where you have people having to be violent, but that's not how things are dealt with. So essentially what happens is that on the online space, you're essentially saying to people, don't say anything, which doesn't work.
I'm sorry, Wellington, I have to end it there. Interesting points from Wellington Khadu from Media Monitoring Africa. This week, we caught up with actor Warren Masemula. He told us what his favorite piece of technology is.
KZN Endre Benegandeven Mbangin Njaga Scroofman Dichanchang. Hi, hello, my name is Warren Masamola, and my favorite technological gadget is my phone because I get my meals from it, I can track my spots, work out on it, and the longest I've tracked is 106 kilometers from PMB to Durban.
Children's rights and health are a priority in the journey of good health.
All children should have access to adequate health care, not only curative but preventative as well.
How to identify ADHD on children.
ADHD is a childhood disorder which manifests with the symptoms of hyperactivity, impulsivity, and or inattention.
Is breastfeeding still a vital nutrition to babies even today?
Breastfeeding for the first 6 months of life is absolutely crucial.
Catch Health Talk with Dr. Sello Mutawung every Saturday from 9 till 10 a.m.
The next insert shows us how a brain-computer chip gave a paralyzed man control of his hands.
This is Ian Burkhart of Ohio. His hands and legs were permanently paralyzed in a diving accident when he was 19 years old. But now, with the help of a new breakthrough computer chip implanted in his brain, the now 24-year-old is playing Guitar Hero.
Up, for the first time of being able to move my hand, it was a big shock because, it's something that I hadn't moved in about 3.5 years at that point. Now it's more of something where I expect it to move.
The small pea-sized computer chip relays signals from Burkhart's brain through 130 electrodes to his forearm, allowing his mind to guide his hands and fingers, bypassing his damaged spinal cord. On Wednesday, scientists and neurosurgeons describing this quadriplegic's accomplishments as a milestone in the evolution of brain-computer interface technology.
This really provides hope, we believe, for many patients in the future as this technology evolves and matures.
Burkhart says the progress is moving along faster than he imagined.
The biggest dream would be to get full function of my hand back, both my hands, because then that allows you to be a lot more independent and not have to rely on people for kind of simple day-to-day tasks that you take for granted.
Scientists are working to improve the technology, which for now can only be used in the laboratory, and move toward a wireless system, bringing Burkhart another step closer to his dream.
Let's see what some people have been sharing on social media.
Orlando Pirates 4-1 win over Golden Arrows has been trending. Fans are now happy that Orlando Pirates is picking up after a shaky first half of the season. Coach Eric Tinkler says he is now hoping for a top 3 finish. South African Olympian Caster Semenya has been a massive chatting point too. She became the first person ever to win the 400, 800 and 1,500 meters at a single South African Senior Athletics Championships. Semenya has been competing in Gothenburg. The annual Gandhi Walk was also trending.
Well done to Caster Semenya. That's it from us this week, but catch us next week Sunday as we bring you more social media and technology news. Remember, we are News Network at sabc.co.za on email and at SABC News on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram. We'll leave you with a video of a solar-powered plane ready to resume first round the world flight from Hawaii. From me and the rest of the network team, good night.
I used to think that I could not
and life was nothing but an awful song. But now I know the meaning of true love. I'm leaning on the everlasting arms. If I can see it, then I can do it. If I just believe it, there's nothing to it. I believe I can fly. I believe I can touch